Hello world and welcome to lesson 2 of our biology class. We are doing botany this year, and as you recall, last episode we did a pretty short introductory episode, and we kind of ended up with our activity where you guys went and kind of looked around in the yard for some plants and sort of sketched them and things like that. Did a pretty good job. Ruby did an amazing job and had her little explorer hat and a little magnifying glass, and it looked super cute. I should have got some pictures probably, but then you had your little. Do you want to tell your story from what happened? What was it that you found when you were out there?
Well, it was we found Mommy found a snake while she was weeding, and it was this little baby snake, like smaller than a worm. And I got him. He was stuck in our drain, and I got him out of our drain and held him, and eventually put him back into the woods.
Yeah.
But he was adorable.
Yeah, Ruby loves snakes.
Me too.
So it was a pretty nice thing for her. She enjoyed that.
I like snakes too.
And
it was adorable. All of us did.
And hopefully you guys had some sort of activity as you did that activity. Hopefully you had a good experience with that. And either way, I think it's just a great thing for kids to get out in nature, explore, go on adventures. So I really encourage you guys out there in internet land, in the age of information and technology and YouTube and everything, it's easy to kind of get stuck in classroom learning as something that we do while we're sitting on a couch or at a desk or whatever. But I think it's also important every now and then to at least to get out and do some exploring, do some hands-on, look at some plants, look at some animals.
Watch
good
the
stuff.
Deer in your yard, eat all of your poison ivy, which is amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was just like a cool thing that happened. So I just want to say, like, I wanted to talk a little bit. I was sort of thinking after our last episode that I wanted to do something, going out over like the scientific method and everything. And I know we've done that in other classes before. I think it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do it for botany because botany's it's kind of a different type of science. So when we think of a lot of times when you think science, you think like scientific method and a scientist, with test tubes in a lab mixing chemicals or whatever.
Doing some crazy
experiments. And that's not really what botany is, right? Botany is more what we would call an observational science. Okay, do you know what that means? An observational science. We know what observation is, right? Jules, what's observation?
I have no idea. I have
What does
no
it mean?
idea.
What's it mean to observe something?
Like to watch, to
Yeah.
look, to...
Yeah, observation is like to watch, to learn, or to watch, to look. When you're observing something, you're looking at it.
With a
You're
magnifying
studying
glass, look at a plant.
Well, it could be with a magnifying glass, yeah, but it doesn't have to be.
Look,
So as opposed to, something like chemistry or, other science like that, where you're sort of doing experiments and collecting data, botany there's really, at least for most of botany, there's not really experiments that you do, right? You're not trying to experiment with plants necessarily. You're just looking at them. And so as opposed to trying to collect data through experiments, you're collecting data by just observation, by just looking at it and saying, oh, okay, I see all these different things. Okay. So it's kind of a very different skill set than more experimental science or like lab-based science, right? There's not a lot of data and analysis and things like that. It's more taking pictures, drawing pictures, making sketches, having that attention to detail right? Where as you're looking at a plant, to stop and think and look at every little detail in that plant and not just look at it and say, oh, there's a plant, but to think about, what is the leaf structure like? What exactly does it look like? Is it an oval shaped leaf, or is it kind of heart shaped, or does it have a lot of little leaves? And what are all these little structures in the leaves? And what's the flower look like? And oh, what's this thing in the center of the flower? So that's that sort of attention to detail and being able to take something and study every little bit about it and kind of pick it apart is more the skill set that you use in like observational science as opposed to something experimental.
Or like also like what's all these like what's the thing that like is rough when you
Yeah, so like
the leaf one way? What
Right.
makes it do that? Or what are these little darker colored green lines in the leaf?
Yeah. So I think you can,
What is
and
it?
we're actually gonna talk about that today. So, but yeah, I can't remember which. I think it was one of you mentioned this last time that plants that have you can sort of like rub it one way,
Yeah,
and it's
then
really
it's
rough,
smooth.
but it's smooth the other day.
Yeah.
And so you can like observe something like that, and then ask the question like, why is that? Right?
It's the hair on the leaf.
Yes, I know, but well,
It's
my
the,
point is you gotta ask those questions.
It's the tree's version of hair.
Sure.
Plants.
Plant version of hair. That has leaves.
Yeah, so we'll get into that kind of stuff later, but so anyway, botany, more of an observational science. Really, the only thing I can think of in botany where you would be doing more like data collection is, if you were trying to do something with like medicine. So if you're trying to use a plant as medicine and trying to study that, then you would need to, like get 100 sick people or whatever and give them the plant and say, does this cure? Give them the medicine. It's like, does this cure your illness? And that's kind of how you show if the medicine works or not.
Also, the plant that I was talking about, that like you can put into the tea that one of our friends' parents said that it looked like. It also looks like really hairy. Like it has a bunch of like white hairs on it, like almost like fur.
Yeah, there's a lot of plants like that are used in medicine. Yep.
What is biology?
Yeah, so we didn't really explain this yet, but botany is sort of a subset or a smaller part of biology. So biology is the study of living things, the study of life, right? So that biology is like plants, animals, bacteria, fungus, all that stuff. Every living thing, that's biology is the study of any living thing. So botany is like a smaller part of biology where it's specifically with plants. Does that make sense? So biology, studying any living thing. Botany, you're studying plants. Cool? So yeah, so the next thing I want to get into, and you guys have done this a little bit before, a lot before, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But taxonomy, do you remember that word?
Nope.
So taxonomy is kind of the way that we organize things in biology, really all of biology, but so that would apply to botany as well. Do you remember the taxonomic classifications?
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
Very good.
And
So how do we remember that?
Cap and put cake on fluffy green snot.
Yeah,
I made that up.
This was, I think it was from a couple years ago when we were doing our class, and I don't know if it was just biology or whatever class it was, and they were
It was animals.
animals. Yeah, so you're going through your animal book, and we got taxonomy as part of that, and they were trying to remember the classifications, so kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And usually you make like a little mnemonic, like something, like a little phrase or something that uses the first letter of, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species to help you remember that order. And there's a few that people recommend and stuff, but the kids apparently came up with.
Well,
Catherine put.
it was Ruby and Mommy.
Yeah.
Mommy made everything up but snot.
Yeah. So Mommy apparently made up. Catherine put cake on fluffy green, and she couldn't think of the last
and then
word.
Ruby went snot.
And then Ruby says snot. So, anyway, if you like that one, use it. If not, come up with your own one. And oftentimes I find the more silly, the more funny of a little phrase that you can come up with, the easier it is to remember. So try to come up with your own. But this is a good one to remember. If you guys haven't had this in your classes already, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And those are the taxonomic classifications that all life is kind of organized into. So kingdom is the top one. Do you guys remember what are the different types of kingdoms? You or you? I don't want Ruby answering every question if we don't have to.
I don't remember. I don't really remember.
Okay, Ruby.
It's like plants, animals,
Mm-hmm.
germs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Humans.
so it's like plants, animals, and it's we'll just say plants and animals. Technically, it's like the kingdoms like Animalia or something weird like that. But it's just like another way of saying animals. Oftentimes they end up being like Latin names and stuff too, and it's
Normally when I think of like
it can be
kingdom as
kinda-
in animals, I think of lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my.
We're like lions and tigers.
yeah. So you have like the animal kingdom, which is all animals, plants. I think we mentioned this last time. Fungus is its own kingdom. It's actually separate from plants, right?
I learned that.
And
just
then
last lesson.
bacteria.
Bacteria.
So there's actually two kingdoms of bacteria. There's like archaebacteria and eubacteria, as I recall. It's just, we're not going to go into all the different kingdoms right now. Kingdoms are like your biggest classification. So it's things like plants, animals, bacteria. There's actually two different kingdoms for bacteria. It's like archaebacteria and eubacteria. Don't worry about memorizing these words right now. Just know they exist, and I just kind of want you guys to know sort of what those different kingdoms are, and that's sort of the biggest classification. And then you get to smaller things like that, down to the level of like species, which is the smallest one, and you're talking like cat. It's like what different like the different like breeds of cat and stuff like that would be species. It's kind of an interesting, this is a total aside, but sort of an interesting thing to think about is because these are sort of classifications that are just made up by how scientists wanted to divide these things up. There's really no like fixed definition for what a species is. It's, and so sometimes you get into arguments over, scientists will get into arguments over, this animal here, like, is it a different species from this one? Or like, what makes something a different species? So like these things, my point is like, these are not quantitative things. They're not based in math. It's not something that you can quantify. Do you remember what that word means, quantify? Jules, quantify? Quantify. So quantify, when you think quantify, think quantity. What is a quantity?
I have no idea.
An amount?
Yeah, an amount or like a number. A quantity of something is like a number, like how much you have.
Like
So when we describe something, we'll usually say it's quantitative or qualitative. These are words that you'll come across sometimes in science. So quantitative means it's something that we can sort of describe with numbers, something that we can describe with math, something that's very specific, right? That we can give a very specific definition for. Something that's qualitative is it's more, like qualitative is like quality. It's kind of more by feel. It's a little more general. Sometimes it's a little bit more of a judgment call, that kind of thing. But quantitative is like, it's solid, it's with numbers and so on and so forth. So the definition of species is more on the qualitative side, interestingly enough. All right, so the last couple things that I wanted to talk about just from this chapter in your book, the last couple things it talks about is just to sort of set up the next few chapters. So the next chapter is on seeds, and we'll go into like different types of plants and stuff. But just to kind of talk about a couple of the major groups that plants are divided up into. So the first one is vascular versus non-vascular. And you'll have this written down in your notebooks when you guys do fill in your notebooks later. But this is like a good word to pay attention to if you have a notebook at home or are just taking notes. Vascular, that's a good word to write down. So do you know what vascular refers to? Have you heard of like your vascular system? So vascular system, when you're talking about like people, your vascular system is like your veins. Okay. So what do you think what a vascular plant would be?
A plant with lots of veins, or
Like a
things that carry, are like veins that carry out the nutrients.
Yeah.
Leaves.
Well,
Like
leaves
sort of have veins.
Leaves are not. Yeah. Well, so that's particularly the vascular part. So if you look at a leaf and you see the little like tubes, the little veiny looking things in it, that is the vascular part of the leaf. Okay. So vascular versus non-vascular. A vascular plant is a plant that has tubes like that, kind of like veins, that carry nutrients around from like in the roots and in the stem. If you like take a plant stem and you do a cross section, which means like here's the stem and you cut it across like that, and then you look, so here's your plant stem and you cut it and you look at that part that you just cut, you might notice that there's like a lot of little tubes kind of in that. So like that's like the vascular part of the plant. What?
So I was reading a book earlier today, and they were like making like maple syrup or something, and it's like they had the trees, and they said like the stuff to make it, like, because like the sap is sap is like trees' blood.
Sort of. Yeah, it's not blood, but it's, yeah.
Sort of.
Kinda, yeah.
And it said it like comes out through the roots, through the trees, and like comes out through the branches. But instead of that, they like poked holes so they could get so they could make syrup. But the thing is, how does it even come up the tree?
That's a whole. We'll get to that later. I don't want to get into that question now because it's kind of complicated. Exactly how the vascular system in plants works. It's like osmotic pressure and things like that, and stuff that we haven't really talked about in science. But the I think we'll get to this in a later chapter, and I think I'd rather hold off and give an explanation to that then, because it gets kind of complicated. But for now, just the main thing I want you to know is that those are kind of the main two groups of plants, vascular and non-vascular. So if vascular plants have tubes, veins essentially, that carry around nutrients, what do you think non-vascular plants have?
Nothing.
They don't
Or
have
very few.
Yeah, not having, right?
Not
Do you
having
remember when you have that word vascular, when you put the word non, or the prefix non in front of it, it just means not, right?
Like how Jules said, I will.
Sure. So, non-vascular plants, that prefix non basically just means not. So non-vascular means it doesn't have like those tubes, those kind of sort of veins. It doesn't have those. So you got to ask the question then, how does it get food and water transported around the plant if it doesn't have a vascular system? What do you think? It just kind of relies on diffusion. Do you remember that word?
Nope.
We did chemistry the other year in our house. Do you remember the word diffusion?
No.
So diffusion is just kind of like the random movement of molecules. Okay. So if you want to have like a good example of diffusion, imagine if you had like a wet paper towel, or just imagine setting out a paper towel and you put water on one end, kind of drop a few drops of water, you're going to see that water like spread out and it'll eventually kind of move on its own, right? That's diffusion, that it sort of spreads out and sort of that those molecules sort of move out on their own. Okay. So it kind of just relies on diffusion. So obviously you can imagine these are not going to be like big, huge trees. These are going to be small, tiny plants. So like moss was the example that your book gave of a non-vascular plant, is basically like moss. And the vast majority of plants are going to be vascular, okay, because they have roots and stems and all those tubes and things like that. Okay.
I was wondering.
Yeah. So there is an experiment in your book. I was thinking about whether I wanted to do it on the video today. Decided against it mostly just for time and things like that. But that's something you can do at home. Is just if you want to see diffusion, you just have like a paper towel and put a few drops of water on it, and you'll see it spread out. The book actually has an activity where you can sort of have different cups of water with different colored food
and then
dye.
You put like paper
You
towel
put paper
going
towel.
over.
Yeah, kind of bridge it with paper towel, and you'll see how it will diffuse across, things like that.
You'll make like a rainbow.
Another fun experiment you can do, and I know we did this probably a few years ago now, so I don't know if you guys remember it, but you can take like a flower or something, like any like flower that you have where you like cut it at the stem, and you know how it is where you have like a vase of flowers. Well, if you and normally you just put water in it, right? And maybe like some plant food to make them last a little bit longer. If you can also put dye in that water,
and it'll change the
and
color
it'll
of the
change,
flower.
and you can see because of the vascular system of the plant, right? It's absorbing that water, so you'll actually see that. And if you had like a white flower and you put red dye in it, you can start to see that red going up into the flower.
Red.
Yeah, so that's another.
That.
Yeah, so that's a cool experiment. I know we've done that before. And another good thing you can do at home, yeah, just have, like how you have roses, probably works better with a white or a lightly colored flower, I would imagine. And then put it in a vase or a cup, just like you would, with like roses or something, and you're trying to make it last longer. Add some food coloring to it, something for dye is a color, and see how that goes up into the plant and spreads throughout the flower. And again, that's an example of the plant's vascular system at work. And just like, how we, for our vascular system, what do we have that moves our blood around our body? Veins, but so your veins are just the tubes, but what's actually moving the blood around in your body? There's something pumping it all around. What's the pump in your body? Say it.
Your heart.
Yeah, your heart. So, yeah. So for us, we have our heart that acts as a pump and pumps the blood throughout our body, right? Plants don't have that. Like you said, how the way why their vascular system actually works is actually a pretty interesting, more complex problem I don't want to get into here, but just know, like, they don't need a pump. There's no pump that plants have that's making their vascular system work. It kind of passively transports water. When I say passively, I mean they're not using energy necessarily.
Like it just flows up.
Yeah.
Somehow water goes up.
Defies gravity.
Yeah. So there's no like big pump or anything that's working on it. So anyway. All right, last thing that I want to cover, in the last major division of plants that this chapter talks about is seed plants. So there's seed plants and then seedless plants. And your book uses this fancy word to talk about them, spermatophyta. If you read the chapter, you would see that word spermatophyta that your book uses for seed plants. It's just kind of a fancy, like, Latin word. Like we said, like a lot of times in science, in biology, and botany especially, the names of things, they'll have like names that come from Latin. So I don't expect you guys to memorize this word, but I just want you to hear it and hear the different parts so that you can pick up on these sort of Latin roots. So that word spermatophyta, so it's like comes from like two words. So like sperm's the first part of that, which is just a word that means seed, and then phyta is plant. Okay, so you don't necessarily need to memorize spermatophyta, but just sort of understand where that comes from, and I just want you guys to hear these words. So sperm is seed, phyta is plant. So spermatophyta literally means seed plant, right? So they're seed plants. They're called spermatophyta. It makes sense. It's all in the word. It's just a Latin. Okay. Fancy, super fancy. So most plants are going to be seed plants. There's kind of a group of plants that doesn't use seeds, that uses more like spores. Do you guys know? Are you familiar with this?
Are like spores the ones that like come out and float around?
Mm-hmm.
Like dandelions?
No, dandelions still have. I think those are still, seeds. Most plants are going to be seed plants, vast majority of them. There's a few plants that aren't, and it's typically like ferns are kind of like the big example of like the class of plants that don't reproduce via seeds, that use spores instead. So the difference between a seed and a spore is, a spore is just like sort of like the baby plant with a little bit of protective coating, right? But the big part of a seed is it's kind of like the baby plant with a little bit of protective coating, but it also has a lot of like food in it, plant food, right? Do you know why it has that food in there?
Because it's going to be underground.
Yeah, so it's going to be, usually seeds, they get, you plant them in the ground, and that little baby plant, super tiny baby plant that's in that seed, when it starts growing, it needs energy to grow, right? But it's not going to get energy until it grows enough to where it has its stem above ground and can start making leaves, right? So it has to grow to have stem and leaves and then roots also, right? So how does it have the energy to grow enough to get stems and leaves and roots? Yeah, so it's the seed, the food from the seed. So it's kind of like that, like starter food for the baby plant. That's what, and if you like look at a seed, that's what most of what's in there is. If you were to like cut a seed open, most of the space in that seed, that's like kind of, in most seeds at least, that's like the sort of food for that baby plant, so that it uses that starter food to grow roots and to grow stem. And then, by the time it's done eating all that food it started with, now it's grown enough that it has leaves, it has roots, it can start absorbing sunlight, absorbing water, it can start producing its own food. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Also, I remember hearing this. I don't remember what it was, but I remember, I heard something, and it was, once the animal was born, it had, its shell, and then it ate its shell for,
so there's some animals that do sort of similar things too, and so if you look at like an egg, like a chicken egg, for example, imagine like you crack an egg and you have the egg white and the yolk and everything, right? What that is that's essentially like the food for the chicken, right? Now, eggs that you get from the store, they're not fertilized eggs, so they're not going to grow into baby chickens. But if you had a fertilized egg that had a baby chicken in it, it's the same kind of thing, right? Your baby chicken starts off as, a few cells, and it grows and grows and grows and grows until it's as big as a chick, where now it's too big for the shell and it breaks out. But by the time it breaks out, it's not fully grown, but it's grown enough that it can, eat and things like that. It still needs its mom to feed him, but it at least has, a digestive system and beak and all that stuff. And so the yolk and, everything inside the egg, it's sort of like the same idea, right? The shell's the protective coating, and everything inside the egg is like food for that baby chick as it's growing from, some number of cells until it's growing and growing and growing until it becomes a chick, right?
When I was younger, I used to think that the yolk and the egg white was the chicken, because it wasn't they didn't do the stuff so that it would actually become a chicken. So I thought the egg yolk and the egg white was the chicken that wasn't actually hatched.
No.
That's what I used to think when I was really little.
Yeah.
And also I learned that how they break the shell is they have an egg tooth.
Mm-hmm.
Snakes too.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of animals that hatch from eggs have a special tooth or something that they that they just have as like a baby that they can use to put through the shell.
They don't have
It's only just birds and snakes, right? And lizards.
Birds, snakes, lizards. Yeah, I mean those are
Alligators.
large groups of animals. Yeah, lots of animals that hatch from eggs. All right, so to wrap up the two big groups of plants that I want you guys to be familiar with, the vascular, non-vascular plants, right? There's a first division. What's vascular mean, Jules? Veins. So
It has
vascular
veins.
is like it has veins or tubes,
Veins.
right? It has
Tubes.
tubes that carry nutrients
Tubes.
around the plant.
Tubes.
And then the second group of plants, what's a spermatophyta? What did we say that was?
Seed.
Seed
Something.
plant,
Seed
yeah.
plant.
So seed plant. And then non-seed plants like ferns that use spores. Taxonomy, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species.
I put cake on Fluffy Gates Knot. I put cake on
Yeah,
Fluffy
that's a
Gates
good one that you
Knot.
guys should know.
Yeah,
I know you
did.
guys already know it, but just for you at home, that's a good one to learn. I think that's going to be it for us today. So we will see you next time.
Smash the like
Peace out.
button and subscribe.